instead receiving instruction entirely remotely, according to Education Next survey. Also, the disparity. 24% of children in traditional public schools attend school in person. 60% of those in private schools do so. And I would say the 60% in private schools is still a shame. That should be 100%. I don't know what 40% of those private schools are doing.
Parents are scared. They're not sending their kids.
And then don't come to my school.
Right. Then don't give them the option. Because at some point in time, this madness has got to stop.
And we've known since last spring, there is piles of research on this. There are piles of research almost as high as the research as to the safety of kids being in school, as to the relative invulnerability that kids have to the virus, relative invulnerability, that you're putting kids far behind with this remote learning. In addition to, oh, by the way, not just putting them years behind in their intellectual development and their skill development in subjects like reading and math, but also, remember once upon a time before COVID when we were very concerned about the amount of screen time for kids?
There's a big PSA announcement like, parents, don't let your kids spend all day on their computer. Take away their PlayStation and their iPhones.
So, again, this has been a theme on this show. Yes, I understand why parents are beating the drums for the public school systems to reopen, even the terrible ones, because this is what they know right now. But some long-term or even medium-term thinking should go into this, particularly with scholarship programs in places like Illinois, EmpowerIllinois.org, the tax credit scholarship program, that provide opportunities to get your child into a better educational setting so you never have to worry about this again, nor will you have to worry about your kid being sent to a totalitarian re-education camp to come out to be a member of Antifa. There's also what actually happens inside the walls when the kids are back inside the walls. There are opportunities, and there are parents taking initiative. Two parents in a Pennsylvania suburb, fed up with not being able to keep their children physically in school full time, are doing one of these essentially parental pods. Stacy Womsley is a mom with two boys with special needs in Westchester, Pennsylvania, 35 miles west of Philadelphia. Both my children have struggled with pandemic learning. They do not like being behind a screen. It's stressful. It's not natural. It isn't suited to how they learn. Last spring was horrible, adds Beth Ann Rosica, another Westchester mother of two boys. My kids were miserable and unhappy. They hated doing online learning. It was an absolute catastrophe in our house, meltdowns every day. Mm-hmm. And so they have taken it upon themselves to create a learning environment in the neighborhood with other parents and their kids, just as we've heard across the country. You are not a victim of your circumstance. There are things that you can do. They may be difficult. They may not be optimal. They may not be what you had in mind going into 2020, but it's what the landscape provides now, and you want the best possible environment for the best possible outcomes for your kids. So let's talk about what is possible. And to help us do that, we're pleased to be joined by Kate Hardiman. She is opinion columnist of the Washington Examiner. She's a former Chicago high school teacher at Holy Trinity, which is over by Goose Island there. Co-author of Unshackled, Freeing America's K-12 Education System. Kate, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So I like this line in a piece about your a piece that you co-authored, I should say, including about your book, with Clint Bolick, who's fantastic. Imagine the transformation of K-12 education if students were the primary source of public school funding rather than, say, in Illinois, property taxes.
Yes, that is a huge part of how we think the model should change. And, at its core, what that really means is more school choice. And, you were talking about that with the Empower Illinois situation in Chicago. So, anything the legislature can do and that, private entities can do to increase school choice for students is a net good for students.
Well, how do we get there? How does that happen?
Yeah, so we really wrote the book because we were hoping that parents would pick it up. Because right now we're seeing this sea change in education where parents are realizing, look, this isn't working. And why isn't it working? So we think there needs to be more political pressure actually coming from the grassroots level, and that would be from parents. Obviously, parents of children trapped in failing public schools have cared about this issue for many years. But unfortunately, those are the actors within the system who have the least amount of power. So we're really hoping that this book enables parents to see, where the system has gone so wrong and what they can do to push for more change.
It continues to be a bit baffling to me how information doesn't get down to the parental level because, I mean, this is not a secret that minority families, their kids in Chicago, in New York, in L.A., who are not in one of the charter schools that have been proven successful or a private school that has a track record of success, that are relegated to those neighborhood schools that have failed students for generations. Remarkable to me that they don't understand what's happening or are unaware of the alternatives that are particularly focused on them to change the circumstances for their child. Or is it they're aware of it, but the resources are just not substantial enough to enable them to make the move? I don't want to ascribe blame, but it's some combination to me of awareness or reaching critical mass in terms of resources. What's your handle on it?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I mean, although I would say there is awareness because we do see, right, parents across the country lying about their zip code to get their kids into a better school district. So they certainly have awareness that their public school, isn't serving their child, and they're even willing to break the law to fix that situation. But I mean, from the standpoint of political capital, right, often in these communities, the public schools are controlled by unions. And that's a huge issue because those unions have more political capital and more money to fund politicians than these parents ever will have. So they're really just being held hostage by their local union. And
but the problem is a great percentage of those residents identify with their captors.
Well, true. However, we're seeing that school choice is really becoming more of a bipartisan issue. And we discussed this a little bit in the book, but it's an interesting issue because it is shifting political coalitions. And what we saw in the Florida gubernatorial election a few years ago is that an African-American Democrat was defeated. And, there was a critical mass of African-American women who voted for the Republican.
Yeah.
And, people kind of looked at this and said, this is a school choice effect.
Yeah, same thing in Arizona with Ducey's reelection and Latino voters. You're absolutely right.
Exactly.
I wonder that we have some great people in the school choice movement, including from minority communities that are success stories, great organizations. But I wonder if we need like a quote unquote crazy Joe Clark. And I was thinking about him because our friend here, friend of the show, Bob Woodson, who is one of those leaders for 50 years that has been so instrumental in changing the way at least some people think about poverty, about opportunity, about everything. He wrote a column about Joe Clark on the occasion of his passing. He passed away last month. For people who remember, Lean on Me. Morgan Freeman played Joe Clark, the Philadelphia principal, with the bat and the emphasis on discipline, to say it lightly. But the point of Joe Clark was he was this charismatic figure who lived the life of coming from being a welfare boy from Newark, as he called himself, to being on the cover of Time magazine because of what he was able to do at that high school. And I understand that not everybody is going to be Joe Clark, and not everybody has the leadership skills or the sort of the innate sense of and courage to do what he did. But it just doesn't seem like as much as we try to be we try to be too reasonable, it seems to me, about allowing this status quo to continue. We've got great people, great intellects, people writing big checks, people making contributions. We try to be reasonable. The teachers' unions are this and parents are this. It seems to me we almost have to have somebody like Joe Clark running around batting people upside the head rhetorically to wake people up to the sense of urgency about what is happening K through 12 education. And now it seems to be the best opportunity that we've had in generations.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, we're heading into what will promise to be a massive standoff between the new Democratic administration and the unions, because the administration is, echoing the science that, as you say, we've known for 8 months that schools are not super spreaders. But the unions are pushing back and they're saying, no, we're still not going. So I agree with you that the timing has never been better to sound this alarm.
And it's so sad because President Biden, when he spoke to the country, one of the first speeches he gave, he talked about, we've got, in the first 100 days, get kids back in K through 8 education. But he's not even considering high schoolers, and they're not even considering high schoolers here in Chicago. So if that doesn't motivate parents, I don't know what else would.
Right. And I mean, there's really no data to support. I mean, sure, very young children might be less likely to spread, but I don't see the difference between an 8th grader and a 9th grader, quite frankly, having taught, 9th grade. So I think that's a distinction without a difference.
So since you were in the Catholic school system here, part of the Arch, around the country you have private schools, Catholic schools loaded to the gills. Here we just announced the closure of 4 schools. Going back to my point, how do we get sort of the energy and the attention that a plucky band of Redditors got by taking on the hedge fund billionaires? How do we have that moment in the school choice movement, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, well, first I'll say that the closure of Catholic schools absolutely breaks my heart. And where those schools close are, in the neighborhoods that need them most. So that's really just a tragedy of this whole.
And if I could add, but sorry to interject, but if I could add, a failure of the Chicago Archdiocese. That's a failure. It's a failure of leadership, especially in these times, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I am so quick to put the blame on the Arch. I mean, I think it's because a lot of families, I chalk it up to a lack of school choice, right? So if you're a family and your financial situation has changed due to COVID, and you were barely scraping together, $1,000 for your kids to go to a Catholic school, and then you lose that income, I don't know, as a parent, that's a really tough choice. So I think it's more of an economic failure and, the issues that we've done.
Well,
self-inflicted wounds to our economy.
Well, and how about self-inflicted wounds to the church and to the archdiocese? Maybe if we weren't sheltering predators and having to pay out 9 and 10-figure judgments, we could have more money to provide scholarships to do the mission of the Catholic Church and people of the Catholic faith. Not to mention, if we weren't spending our time talking about $15 minimum wages and immigration policy and doing the social justice song and dance, maybe we could focus on things like educating children in a way that we don't in Chicago under Supich in particular. I mean, let's just be real frank about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the church could do a much better job about taking on school choice as a core issue. And I mean, I think this is going to become much more important too as public schools become controlled by, leftist curriculum. And so I really think the church should be foremost, among the people beating the drum for school choice and drumming up donors.
She is Kate Hardiman, opinion columnist, Washington Examiner, former Chicago high school teacher at Holy Trinity, as we were discussing, co-author of the book Unshackled: Freeing America's K-12 Education System. Kate, thanks for joining us. Good luck with the book.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
Hey all, this is Jim Carr, co-host of the #1 rated manufacturing podcast, Making Chips, and a customer of Signature Bank. If you're a crazy busy company owner